Hi, it's Michelle. I'm from My Fashion Tutor. Today I'm going to be going through proportion tips for technical flat drawings using Adobe Illustrator. It's quite interesting. I've seen quite a few videos on YouTube at the moment. They're quite good actually. I was really inspired. However, there wasn't many that was actually about using Adobe Illustrator and doing flat drawings using computer-aided design. There was a lot live drawings, being able to do proportions, but not any using Adobe Illustrator. So hence why I'm posting this video to help out many people that I know have problems with this. So hopefully by the end of it you'll be a little bit more clearer on how to get your drawings looking more realistic according to the body. So let's have a start. Just some facts to go through. It's impossible to get the correct proportion of a garment without relating each part of the garment to each other. So what I mean by that is if you have a collar, for instance, a typical stand collar, like a shirt collar, and you have a typical shirt cuff, if your cuff is very wide, wider than your neck, obviously your drawing is not going to be in proportion. So you have to kind of look at your garment in proportion to each segment of that garment. So if one element of your garment is out of proportion, it throws the whole garment out of proportion. So you could have bits that are spot on, but if one bit's not exactly right, then it makes the drawing look very weird. So perspective and proportion go hand in hand. Now by this, what I mean is sometimes when we're drawing a flatter garment, we tend to look it on the body, especially if we're using a template, and we forget that the perspective needs to be flat. So we must consider the design on the body, but not in isolation. We must remember that we're actually drawing it flat. It makes a big difference. Okay, if you can imagine looking at something head on and mixing it with something that's a bird's eye view, it gets very distorted. So consider the actual technical drawing as flat, but don't forget that it actually is going on a body. Okay, you need to consider the whole look of your garment. So what do you want it to look like? So if you want it to be quite fitted, you know that when you're actually doing your technical drawing, it needs to be closer to the waist if that's the case, if it's fitted around the waist. So you need to consider what you want your garment to look like. It's very important. I see a lot of people that do fashion illustrations, like a fashion sketch of what their design's going to be. But then when it comes to putting it into a technical form, it looks nothing like that. It's not a good representation. So you need to think about what your concept is and how you've illustrated your design in the first place. Only trace over photos of garments if you're certain that the fit is correct. By this I mean if you've got a toile or a prototype that you've made up, if it doesn't fit to the body correctly, don't use it. Sometimes people use it and the chest is too tight or the sleeves are too short. Then if you go and trace over that, it's going to affect the proportion of your technical sketch, your technical drawing. Only trace over reference photos from the internet to get a basic block. Make sure it's a good representation to the fit and the basic styling that you require. So if you want a peacoat, for instance, you don't want to be tracing over a bomber jacket. It sounds really silly, but you need to make sure that whatever you're using as a reference is a good representation in terms of shape and styling. Another tip is if you're doing an asymmetric jacket, you know, maybe it's a good idea to find an asymmetric jacket to trace over just to make sure. So that's really key when you're selecting reference photos over the internet to trace over. If in doubt, just use the croquis, which is the human figure template, which we're going to be looking at. Last but not least, draw the garment from top to bottom. It makes it a lot easier, and again, it goes back to perspective, how you see something, how you view it. And it's much easier to start from the top of drawing from a garment and work your way down to the bottom, than to work from the bottom upwards. Okay, so a couple of things to check whilst you're after you've done your technical drawing. You need to check, is the waist bigger than your shoulders? So if your waist is bigger than your shoulders, you've got a bit of an issue, because that's not actually possible. it's not possible really, unless, for instance, the person is very, very overweight. Then obviously your waist is bigger because the stomach is bigger, so it's going to be bigger. On tops, when you're looking at tops, look at where the hem ends in relation to the end of the sleeve. People make a big mistake with this. Your arms can only be so long. No one's arms is past their knees, so obviously there's an actual restricted, there's an average sleeve length. Look at your illustration. If it's a crop top, it means that your waist obviously should finish much higher than the end of your sleeve if you've got a long sleeve. So look at the hem and the sleeve in relation to each other when you're looking at your fashion illustration, or when you're generally designing something. How close should the neckline be in relation to the neck? Now, I get a lot of this happen as well. Some people, when they're drawing their necklines, they actually want the neckline to be bigger, or they want it to be closer, for instance, and they draw it miles away from the neck, so it actually even looks really, really big. So you need to think about how close your neckline should be to your neck. The chest should never be wider. It depends what you're drawing, but the chest should never be wider than the shoulders. And when I say shoulder, I mean shoulder point to shoulder point. I'm not talking about shoulder seams. Okay, the other thing to look at is your styling details. If you look at your illustration and you have seams, for instance, like princess seams, there's the seams that go through your bust through to your waist. And if you look at those, for instance, if you've designed it that way, you need to look at the distance from the side seam on your illustration and make sure that it's replicated on your technical drawing. What I find sometimes is on the illustration, it may be very slim or it may be further away, but it doesn't match up to what's on the technical drawing. So you need to make sure that those distances are relatively the same. And that's that for the moment. What we're going to do is I'm going to bring you over to a template and just talk you through a bit more about the proportions. I think this will make it a lot clearer once we've done this. So I'm going to start off with the female figure. I am going to put up a